Hello, my name is John Mayer, and I'm the Executive Director of CALI, the Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction. The video you are about to watch is from the annual CALI conference held at the University of Michigan School of Law in Ann Arbor, Michigan on June 4th and 5th, 2026. Most U.S. law schools are members of CALI. CALI publishes over 1,400 interactive tutorials that teach the law to law students. Faculty can also use LessonLink to create formative assessments using CALI lessons. CALI publishes casebooks by paying law faculty to write and review books that can be adopted in many courses in law school. These books are free to download from our website, or print versions can be purchased at near cost. You can download the PDFs or even the Microsoft Word versions of most of our books and add your own commentary before distributing to your students. $300 casebooks are a thing of the past, and adopting one book from CALI saves you more than your entire institutional membership. If you would like to learn more, email me at jmayer@cali.org. I would be happy to visit or zoom into your school to talk about CALI.
Okay.
Okay, Greg Sarab, CEO of Xtegrity. We've been making exam software for quite a long time. Jim Becker, what's your title again?
Director of Tech Support.
That's right. And Jim was previously at Louisville Law School and been with us for a couple of years. So we're going to talk about what sort of paradigm shift or maybe just a different way of seeing how exam integrity kind of works. And it gave us an idea, and then we built something to help with that. So over to you, Jim.
All right. So I have a question before we start. Yesterday at the keynote, John mentioned that we had 34%, I think, law librarians here, and then 20-something% tech people, and the other 20-something were, wait, that doesn't add up to 100, whatever. We had a plurality of law librarians, then we had about an even split between tech people and faculty. So who are law librarians in this room? 2, okay. All right, tech people? Okay. And faculty? All right, so we're actually kind of, more faculty than anything else. So, okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, so as Greg said, we're going to talk about exams. And are any of you, well, I know one of you, are customer schools of ours. Do the rest of you, oh yes, 2 of you are customer schools. Do the rest of you even know what you use? And is it exam 4? Not exam 4? Okay, just curious. All right, so here is where we're starting. The problem is AI has disrupted the traditional open, closed model of exam security, and blocking the network, as we now know, is no longer enough to ensure exam integrity. So we have a framework we will show you in more detail, 4 categories of exam materials that we have identified that should or could safely belong in an exam. And if any of you can challenge us with a 5th or 6th category, we'd like to know that. And then we're going to show you our solution, which is moving from the old model of open versus closed to what we're calling controlled access. And we're introducing our bookstore in order to solve this problem. Okay, so the assumption that held until it didn't, pre-2010, more or less, in the early days of exams on, or computers on law school exams, and on bar exams for that matter as well, were typically the computer took the place of the traditional blue book, but exams were administered, as they always had been, on paper, in a room, on site, proctored by a human or somebody resembling a human. And then about the 2010s, due to a number of factors, things started moving. People got more comfortable with computers. They weren't, the scary, cheating machines that people had initially thought they were. and started moving toward more open ways of doing exams, open book exams, open notes exams, and things like that. And the software evolved, and also just the exponential growth in the number of accommodations that students required, or the number of students requiring accommodations, also kind of pushed the boundaries and created more flexibility. And then, as we all remember, COVID hit in 2020. So then everything became a take-home exam. Everybody was forced into having to administer exams in open environments where you didn't have those traditional controls, you know, in-person, on-site, proctored, and so on. And then, just as we were coming back from COVID and getting used to the way things used to be, AI happened. ChatGPT came along in 2022. So that put an end to the assumption that open environments that we had gotten used to, especially during COVID, could be secure. So any kind of communication now, communication vector, equals a risk. Local tools, online services, and of course AI is the most scalable form of that risk. So that caused a tsunami, for lack of a better metaphor, post-COVID, and everybody came back, some came back to where they had been pre-2010s, and started requiring handwriting and blue books again in some situations, even as a response to the risks of AI. It might have been an overreaction, but it has happened. Okay, so the conflict we find ourselves in now is the old closed exams, which blocked all communication, including AI access, also eliminate access to online sources that a lot of people got used to using, or because of how technology and publishing has evolved, these other sources are not available in the old model of, you know, closed exams. So online statutes, rules, codes, things like that. Electronic casebooks are inaccessible when you have a truly closed exam, and so are student notes. And modern pedagogy, as you all are very well aware, frequently requires those things, and most especially electronic casebooks. Well, I'll just leave it at that, about electronic casebooks. So in order to permit those things that modern law teaching or current teaching actually wants and needs, you know, online rules, statutes, codes, and so on, access to casebooks, and sometimes student notes and outlines, cannot be accomplished in the old, with the old model of, you know, closed exams. So what we need to do is rethink that, and figure out a way to allow in necessary materials while preventing that dangerous communication to, you know, outside sources, natural or artificial. So, so where we are now, online AI or internet-based AI sources are the predominant risk. And network blocking cuts that off. But we are moving, we're not quite there yet, but we're moving to a point, you know, in the very near future where local LLMs will run on consumer hardware. Right now, it would take a really beefy student laptop, probably an Apple with an M processor, to run a local LLM powerful enough to generate a good law school exam answer. So we're not there yet. The risk of local LLMs is not, you know, as great yet as some people may fear, but it's coming, and it's only a matter of time, and it's short term. So in a very short time, local LLMs will be capable of giving meaningful answers, and the laptop itself will become the risk vector. So we have, this is the model I was talking about, we have identified 4 kinds of exam materials that could be allowed into an exam. So The school-controlled exam server, and I'll go into detail, or we'll go into detail about each of these in a second. I'm just introducing them here. The school-controlled exam server, student-selected local files, notes, outlines, and so on, the open internet, and then secured external content. And this is the new paradigm. So the school-controlled exam server, we solved this a long time ago. Exam 4, I can speak for that. Exam 4 for quite a while has permitted questions, exam questions, supplemental materials from the professor, such as, statutory supplement, set of rules, things like that. We have permitted those into a closed exam for some time. That's school curated content that the exam administrator in collaboration with the faculty member provide to the student in a closed exam setting. That's done on a server that the exam administrator manages, which is obviously a known and trusted location. And we've been doing this for a while now. So this is not anything new.
And we can add, and in deference to ExamSoft gentlemen here, this is not limited to Stegrity. This is how exam software works. We can, I assume it goes on a server that you control, and then so this is the standard generally, and mostly what we're saying is broad standard, and we're not trying to, this is not a sales pitch.
Yeah, I can't speak for you, but at the same time, I'm not omitting what they're doing.
We're sure they're doing that.
Yeah. So, okay. So student selected local files. So open notes capability, again, has been a possibility for quite a while. So allowing students to let in, and that initially was done through different exam modes. You could have, with exam 4, the closed mode exam locks out everything. The open laptop mode allows the student to get to local files, so notes, outlines, things that are stored locally. Open laptop plus network lets them get to everything local and then anything online. So if they've got, they're using cloud storage for notes or whatever, they could get to that. We have moved to now permitting in a closed mode exam, the student at the faculty members, discretion, the student can now pre-exam during the startup sequence can select 1 file, 5 files, however many the professor permits, as PDFs, and preload those or attach those to the exam session so those notes, outlines, whatever is permitted, are accessible to the student in the exam session without the student being able to get to anything else on his or her computer once they've begun the exam session. And they can't crash the computer after they've seen the exam questions, go back, pull up, a different set of notes or something like that. So once they've selected what they're allowed to access during the exam, during the startup sequence, they are locked into that until they complete the exam session. So that's where we are on student permitted material or permitted student materials. So, okay, so yes.
What files selected with all that?
That's a.
We haven't got, you're implying that we would absorb that file and submit that up.
Yeah, I don't. You should be.
Say that, then I shut it off.
Oh.
So let me just repeat that. So I think you're implying that we would grab the file and then submit that with the exam. And we haven't done that at this point. We talked about it a little bit, but of course, in a regular open exam where somebody had access to their notes, that wouldn't have happened either. And one of the reasons we're having this, and you'll see the last slide, is what are we missing, right? If you or others, or if we start to hear that some more, I don't see why we couldn't grab it, because it's not much different than attaching a file to a take-home exam, which we already do. I don't want to speak authoritatively on that, but I think that would be not completely unreasonable. The question is, do you think the instructors are going to want to review all of that? Yeah. Right. I think interestingly,
In that respect, we do control it by number of documents. So
yeah, but just by number of
a student
documents.
could have a single document, 5 documents, whatever the professor wants to permit. But like Greg was saying, in an open, traditional open laptop exam where the student could open their notes if they're allowed to, we would assume that in this situation they would do the same. If they're permitted one bite at the apple, and instead of opening their outline, they open the script of Abbott and Costello's Who's on First routine instead, they do that at their peril. So it doesn't really help them.
Yeah. I think it is actually one of the reasons we hesitated for so long to put this in, which was that we thought that the instructors would want more control over the file itself. And then I think the light bulb just went on one time. In a regular open notes exam, they're not looking at those. So this replicates that. But what you're suggesting is that now, because the environment is more controlled, if they want to come up with something between the traditional open notes exam and kind of a curated open notes or controlled open notes, you can submit the file to me that you're going to put in there, and then I'll approve it. I mean, I don't know how many instructors are going to want to put that much effort into it, but could we control it by number of pages? But then you can write it in small type and enlarge it. So it starts to get into gamesmanship. And at a certain point, I'm definitely getting diminishing returns on controlling that. So here, I think we've 80-20 or 95-5'd it just by saying, okay, treat it like open exam has always been treated. So, but an interesting question, and you can see that we have overthought that dramatically. Yes.
Okay, so the open internet, obviously it's unsafe, nowadays for, can't give a closed exam with internet access wide open to students and expect them not to cheat, frankly. So, on its face, that's obviously unsafe. But just a case study, this is an example in our experience with an actual customer who requested access to a specific statute on a particular website in a closed exam. So they wanted us to customize things a bit so that the exam was otherwise closed, but from within the exam session, students could get to a particular site or a particular URL on a particular site. And the page loaded correctly, inside our browser. But the page navigation, because of how modern websites are built, it had outbound links that a student who was sophisticated enough could follow outside the exam session. So what we had to request was that the publisher of the website that had the statute build a custom version of it for this customer of ours that eliminated all those outbound links. So even whitelist, so the lesson we learned is even whitelisting a particular URL isn't the solution, because that URL, you can't rely on that web page, having only trusted sources on it. So, okay, so what we learned from that is that the way to approach this is by securing that external content that the professor wants to permit in. And particularly ebooks, because we get a lot of requests from customers asking, when are you going to let ebook, when are you going to have ebook access in your software? And we get questions from students taking exams. How do I access my ebook in your software? Because I'm allowed to, it's a closed exam, but I'm allowed to use my book. And the solutions, to be candid, that the publishers have come up with aren't particularly reliable. They're compromises at best for doing that. So what we have done is built our own bookstore. And with that, we have, obviously, a trusted source because we control it. So books coming from our bookstore are accessible inside an exam for closed exam. So if the student has purchased, acquired, however they've gotten the book for the course, they can access that book if permitted by the professor. And the exam administrator sets that up. So if the professor says, students in my course may use their ebooks on my final exam, and here is the book, and the students have acquired it from our bookstore, then they can get to their ebooks during the exam session. And our bookstore is like any other online ebook platform. Students can annotate. They use it all semester long as their ebook reader. They can annotate, they can highlight, and all of that. And in fact, we just recently patented this. So, yes. Okay.
Well, let's
Now's a
do
great
it.
time to ask them.
About it. Okay, so we've got a variety of vendors that our students can purchase ebooks from, but mostly Aspen, West, that sort of thing. So are you saying that you are working with those content vendors to import their books into your ebook store, or are you saying that you have a different content source for a book?
Want me to answer that one? Yeah. Take it. So you've caught us at a crucial and fascinating moment where answering that question will happen, but I can't answer it yet. So what I can tell you is we debuted this with Cali Books. So I urge you to switch all your professors over to Cali Case Books. And there's literally nothing in it for me, only for Cali and your students and your faculty. However, we understand that there's a certain amount of inertia among faculty, and they've built their entire, shtick around the casebook that they maybe even wrote. And so we can't do everything, but we hope to hear from Aspen and West real soon. And it'll be a good solution for everyone. And I would also like to point out, my friend Tino is sitting right here nodding, that even to the point of, the bookstore is a platform, and it's not necessarily dependent on being inside of our exam software. You think I'm a CEO of a software company. I've been doing this for 3 decades. I make a living doing this and all of that. This is bigger than that. I mean, the students are hobbled by this, and faculty are hobbled by this. And the solution can work in the current competitive environment. And I, don't think I need to say a lot more, but we are exactly how this plays out. This is not a play by us to take over all law school exam software, contracts. This is more about solve the problem and do it right. And I think we will talk to them and find a way to make this work for everyone.
No, I don't think so. If I understand your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I get the question either, actually.
No, it's got to go through our bookstore.
If the publishers will need to put their books in our bookstore, and it is like any other bookstore, but the law environment is different, right? The ebook platforms sell into not even only into academic environments, but to many environments. Anybody wants a book in an ebook. Kindle is an example. In fact, there are many textbooks in the Kindle environment, but there are some that predominate in the academic environment, especially in the law school environment. But for them to tailor the way that works so that it works neatly with exam software that's used basically only in law schools and in a couple other environments, even the other places that exam software is used outside of the law school environment, it's not really used the way it's used in the law school world, right? This is a pretty unique environment. And so Extegrity focuses on the law schools, and so our awareness of this is very high. We're very responsive, and we've spent time analyzing and agonizing over how to do this. And it was a couple of years ago now that this case that Jim was talking about came up. And it just kind of got us thinking. And so we're looking, well, how do we do this? Well, why does this not work? How do we do it? How about this way? No, why does this not work? And what are our options? Now it's a business problem more than a technical problem. I just got to get the publishers in. I don't want to arm twist them. I don't want to have my customers be doing business arm twisting on my behalf. Maybe I'll be happy to have my competitor help me do some arm twisting on your behalf. I'm okay with that, more or less. We talked about this. Maybe that's the right approach, but law schools are special, right? I'm all in, you're all in. Well, you're partially all in, yeah, because they do other things. They do more different things than we do. But doing what law schools need, I mean, it's not really going to be anything almost anybody else really needs. And the publishers, I'm not picking on them. I don't know if they're watching me, right? But the main law school publishers also are law school, right? And don't necessarily do much outside of it, as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong. But to the extent that they want to do what law schools need, in the same way that we want to do what law schools need, this is a solution. And is it the solution? Probably. Probably. Yeah, thanks for asking. Where are you, by the way? Okay. All right.
Let me just add to what Greg said, that we have talked to the publishers. They know what we're doing. So this isn't anything we're hiding.
And we're not surprising them.
Yeah, they're not going to be surprised about this.
So this is, yeah, this is the issue, right? And finding a reasonable perimeter is a challenge, and kind of the challenge. We would have to see some examples of something that bumps into our perimeter before we could kind of think through where's a reasonable place, the best place to set that. But my gut, just listening to what you're describing, is that while those links may be useful during the semester, and possibly could be useful during an exam, it seems like more of a stretch during an exam to be starting following links down the way. So for example, but that's the thing, right? I mean, it's the resource that's in the bookstore is the book itself. And controlling where the links go, generally by not allowing them at all, is what we would do. But we have control over what we do there. But I'm thinking that, at least during an exam moment, probably not following links. And that seems like it should be a fit with a way a book is used in an exam, because by the time you're following links in a casebook during an exam, don't you think? That's the only reason they would be. What's up, Greg? Right. So Greg is asking what happens, at least in the short term, when these books are mainly available on other platforms or through the publishers themselves, but people want to use it through our bookstore. I think like any other paradigm shift, there is, even if it seems to happen quickly, there is you can drill down and see that there's a moment of transition, which is my answer. Which is my way of saying, I don't know exactly, but clearly have to figure it out. And it's not just me that has to figure it out, it's also the publishers will have to come up with something that meets their John is here, and money has been exchanged for access to books of yours under certain circumstances, right? How, like if people wanted to print on demand kind of a thing, right? So when you're adding value of some kind, so you like the concept of charging is at least familiar to you. So like, do you have a sense of how, or should we just like leave that question be for now? No. How we would handle the case where somebody has already paid for a license for a book on a different platform, I mean, is that just lost? And then we have to just get it all. It's like it's a messy transition until it switches and then it's clear.
But what you're buying, you can always get the book for free as a download from the website. That'll never change. Buying it from another place to buy it, you want some capability that we can provide. Buying a print book for you, you're buying from Amazon or because we have to charge for it, but they have done it. It's complicated. For the
But when the book is, $350, that's a harder moment. So the answer, Greg, is absolutely that needs to be figured out, and it is not going to get figured out by me alone. That's going to be in coordination with the publishers, and that's how transitions work. Things transition. Yeah, what's up? We're not. Yes, and I'll translate that into we are not trying to create a barrier. We are trying to do the opposite. We're trying to solve a problem that's bugging people in a way that we have tried to do other ways, but it is pretty much abundantly clear. The part of the analysis that's up here, I don't know if it's this screen or not.
The next slide.
Sorry. That putting a book into a site that is managed so that something on that site can be seen inside the secured exam environment, we can't really hand that off to a third party because they won't know. And here's the thing, let's say they insisted and they were going to manage it and we had to go access their stuff. They changed something. Who are you going to be angry at? It's me. It's us. It's our software. You're not going to go, hey, the publisher must have messed this up. You're going to think we messed it up. And that's one thing, blame I can handle, right? What I can't handle is I've interrupted the exam process. And the publishers, bless them, that's not their focus exactly. They've never had to deal with that before, and you can't really blame them, right? They wouldn't necessarily think that way. They could think that way, but that's not what they do. They don't solve that problem. We solve that problem. Things working during an exam in a secured way. That's what we do, right? So if somebody's going to take responsibility for that, it's us. I think if they want to buy it off us, I don't know. Say it again. Right, they'd have to put it there in a place. They'd have to put in basically inert file in a location that is within a safe place that we've built, and then we can not only certify that it's okay, but we can also manage it so that it will be okay. And so when you sort of see how that organism has to be constructed, it only, it's not something where you can, take the brain out and put it in a jar and still have it work. It kind of has to still be in the skull. John.
Thinking of a possible methodology and they brought her bookstore and doctor the other were like, and at that point any publisher can put a copy of their book into the repository, which can be available for the student, right?
Yeah.
Such that, say, for Alley Book, the Alley Book would be Alley Bookstore. For that person would be there, if that book is put on this, for we understand
Right. Okay. So yes, conceptually. Conceptually. So here's a limitation that I think that 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 I've recognized we bump into, and that I think bumps into what you're describing, which is that students kind of want a familiar experience, an expectable experience that's like what they do. And I think there's a naturalness to that, and versus having to do something special at exam time and not being sure, and then there's questions and all that. But I think the other thing is that, well, I mean, to go back to the first one, our bookstore provides a bookstore-like experience. You buy the book, you annotate, you highlight, and you use it, and you're familiar with it, and it's comfortable. And then when you get to exams, it's exactly what you've been doing all semester. And so there's something about that is, it's got a continuity of experience that is going to make people be pretty happy, versus having to like remember how to do a thing. And so if they were to be bringing in the exam copy of their book, and I know publishers do this now in some cases where they'll provide that under certain circumstances, but then you end up with a book in a format you're not that familiar with possibly, but also doesn't have your notes or your annotations, and it puts you at a disadvantage. So solving for that is, well, it is. Um, so so um, so in deciding whether to call it a bookstore or something else, right? It feels like mostly what students do with books, and where books, bump into exams and all of that, is with bookstore books, right? And there are other things, but of course on Amazon, I often will browse around in the free Kindle books, right? And a Kindle book on a paid platform that's free is a free book on a paid platform, and it's not alien. It's it's a similar thing. I just didn't have to pay for it. So similarly with the Cali books on our bookstore, right? They're free, and that's where they'll stay. And so other resources that come in there's free resources, and maybe there'll be paid resources if that happens. But I think if I had to pick one direction or the other, a bookstore with free things versus a repository with some paid books, I mean, I'm wondering, really it just comes down to which model I can describe more clearly, I think. Then gotta start somewhere.
Michael.
Yeah. So there's really,
Repeat the question for.
yeah, I will.
the
And
audience here.
there's actually really two questions in there. So the question is, is there a limit on the PDF size that would go in the bookstore platform? But the second question that's actually part of that is, does it go in the bookstore platform, or does it go on the server, where both of our software have long allowed things to be put? If I can construct a sentence that poorly in public and not get embarrassed. So I would think you're solving that already by putting that PDF on your own server. 300 pages is a lot, but there are ways to bring the file size down. And I believe that should work perfectly fine, both on the existing exam server setup, and probably works fine on this bookstore setup too. Yes, clearly we're going to have to do a completely different scale of operation as far as holding all this material. But it's definitely something that servers do at scale. And so one of the interesting aspects of what you're describing is, if you put it on your school's exam server, that book is available to students at your school. If you put it in the bookstore, pretty much, I think, unless we build some other filter, it would become available to any law student or any student or anybody that goes into our bookstore. So that would be a consideration. Is it? And I don't want that to sound like a negative, because in many ways it's not. Because I mean, there have been talks here and other places over many years about open educational resources and like access to those sorts of things for people who are minded that way and want their materials to be available broadly. We would end up being a pretty nice platform for that too, and a plus. So where it exactly, lands and how it the array of that, I'm going to trust the process.
But the flexibility to do either is there.
Yeah.
So theoretically, we have 50 different versions of the coursework now that are all able to have. Each student has their own version of their own language.
Their own version, yeah.
Yeah, their notes, their own notes, and not anybody else's. Yeah, and then there's some sort of common sense safeguards, like for example, and this is just us being paranoid, right? If you're a student and you give your credentials to a friend and then you use the annotations during an exam to type questions and answers back and forth, we cut that off. But that's not going to happen. And there's things like that, and that only comes about because we're paranoid and we know what people will try and get away with, and that's okay. Yeah, but no. Yes.
Yeah, but the way it works on the back end is the school exam administrator, at the faculty member's direction, selects the book from the inventory in our bookstore. This is the title that students are allowed to access on this exam. And then any student who is enrolled in the course and authorized to take the exam then has to authenticate with his or her own bookstore credentials to reach their version of the book. But that book, or the title, is available because it's been set up that way for that exam. Yes? No, that's browser based. And we'll show you the bookstore itself here in a minute, but that's
Actually,
entirely browser.
We probably move along. We're going to run out of time. We got a couple more slides.
Yeah. Well, I mean, oh yeah. Yes. That's entirely browser based. You can do it on your phone. Annotation and stuff might be a little difficult that way, but you can do it. Okay, so this is just kind of a review of where we started and where we are now. The old open versus closed model, and the new controlled access model.
We were at the end.
No, we are pretty much at the end, and I think unless somebody's got other questions, this is kind of where we wanted to end up with. Are there things we haven't thought of? Scenarios from your own experiences.
Other kinds of resources
that don't fit into this box that we've created. Implementing it? So, okay. All right, well, that's the end of that. So let me flip over here to get my cursor back. There it was. All right, let me.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so here is our bookstore. So the address is books.exam4.com. And I'm just going to log in. But from the home page, you can see we've got some featured books, and those should all look pretty familiar because they're all Cali books. So I'm just going to log in with my saved credentials here. So this is what it looks like, for any student with an account. At the moment, our bookstore is not, publicly available. It's publicly accessible. But if you went to register, it would prompt you for an invite code, which we're not sharing yet. But we have piloted this with several of our customers, over the last couple of months, or last few months. So when we, go into full production, we'll get rid of that invite code prompt. You'll just create an account with, username and a password you create for yourself, and then you can start buying books. So this is my library. So let me go to this Torts book here. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this, but anyway, but this is the reader interface. So it looks pretty much like any other e-reader. Page navigation's over here, page thumbnails are over here. Here's the markup tools over here, highlighting, strike through, underlining, and so on. You can draw circles and squares. You can change your highlight color and things like that. So, and it's strictly browser based. So this is pretty much what it looks like. And that's how it works. So it's as simple as that. And then it's accessible inside our software, at the professor's discretion and, once the school sets it up. So what we need to do now is populate it with books. So.
PDF and this is still pretty much a PDF interface with.
As far as I know, that's kind of what Aaron built, right?
I mean, it's definitely a case where we would try to avoid making it complicated.
So
The standard would be, yeah, that would be ideal.
So.
Yeah, no, proprietary stuff, right? It's pluses and minuses. So this is more about plus. We're trying to keep this be all about pluses if possible.
So, any other questions? Thoughts? Yes.
well, I'm gonna say, look at the scoring, feedback.
Let's take that offline. All right.
Okay. Oops. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much.